Call the meeting to order. 6:30. Everybody stand up, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, Peter. Can you unmute? All right, so we'll go ahead and get roll call, please.
All board members are present this evening.
All right, no suggested changes for the agenda tonight. So we'll move to approve.
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support. Be moved and supported. Vote, please.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
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 Motion carries.
Multitasking, not a man's best feature, so I'm told. Next item is the consent agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Moved and supported. Vote, please.
Mrs. Chenoweth? Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, announcements and information inquiry. The township offices are closed Monday, September 7th, 2020 for Labor Day. The Highland DDA Farmers Market is every Saturday through October 10th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the township's accepting applications for a full-time administrative position in the supervisor's office. Haley, are you interested in that job? Shoot.
I'm happy where I am.
Oh, really? I'm happy where I'm at too. So, well, thanks for the denial. You know, I'll be okay on that. So next, we got a presentation by Congresswoman Haley Stevens.
Well, look, no, all those jobs are great. And by the way, you know, any role in any government and municipality, and certainly, you know, at the federal level too, we're seeing this. You know, we're believers in good government, and you all are such an example of that. And it's nice to see how you're all assembled. And thanks for your leadership, Rick. It's a real treat to be talking to the township today. I'm in my district office all the way in Livonia. In other circumstances, I'd be with you in person. But I'll just tell you, we're so proud of you guys up in Highland, and it's a real honor to work with you and to represent this township in the United States Congress. I'll just tell you really quickly, last summer, as part of my 26 towns tour, I got to go and visit Milkweed Mile, and I, you know, hung out at the Butterfly Fest at the awesome library, and I was wow at your library. And it's such a great example of the stewardship and the dedication that all of you show to the community every single day. And, you know, look, we've got a lot of topics in Washington, and I'm, you know, happy to update you. Just was on a call with most of the Congress today, kind of just giving an update on the agenda. You know, we're still running a little bit short in terms of our education needs. Michigan has done a great job with our CARES Act funding. Really proud to see Lansing and the governor strike a deal for our schools. Oakland County, you know, has been distributing masks to all the schools. You know, we salute all of our students as we're getting ready to go back to school here. But there's still some outstanding matters. And I'll just tell you all, I'm pretty removed from the infighting. All right. I'm in the get stuff done agenda. You know, in this first term in Congress, I've been on the Education and Labor Committee, been able to work across the aisle, even when they pressure me not to. I've been able to do that. And also on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, which has really been a big boon for this district. And, you know, the hard-nosed work that we know we need to do here as a district and as a Congress to serve our economy. And that's focusing on innovation, that's focusing on workforce development and skills training. I know all of you have probably seen some of these transformations with the first robotics teams and these just remarkable high school students who get access to all these great skills, and then some of them go into apprenticeship programs. So whereas, education 25 years ago was really taken kind of a different direction, and he thought, oh my gosh, it's all going to be services and people aren't making things with their hands. Well, newsflash, we make things with our hands here in Michigan. So my first bill, the Building Blocks of STEM Act, got passed. It got signed into law. It was a bipartisan, bicameral bill. No new money, but it was utilizing dollars that already flow through the National Science Foundation to say, hey, let's prioritize early childhood education and a continuum in the STEM field, in that science, technology, engineering. We can say the A for arts, and then also math. And this is, we have boys and girls getting into these programs. There's something for everyone. I've seen it with my own two eyes, and this has really fired up our district. And I just want to put that out there, that the National Science Foundation is a great funding partner, and my office is always willing to work with anyone on grants and grants dollars. But then the other exciting thing going on is some of the work that I've been able to do in advanced manufacturing for this district, passing the Advanced Manufacturing Leadership Act last year, again, signed into law. My co-sponsors were Kennedy, Balderson, Gonzalez. Balderson and Gonzalez are from Ohio, and they're on the other side of the aisle. But I think what's more significant is it's Michigan and Ohio working together, to win on manufacturing R&D, technology transfer, and that workforce training components. And we've just been able to coordinate all of our stakeholders. A lot of our partners here locally have been impacted by this. And then certainly making sure all you guys get what you need as a municipality. And sometimes if you don't need anything, that's okay. That's okay too, but we're here for you, and we're here for all the constituents who really benefit from the work that we do here in our office in Livonia, that case management work for our veterans, our incredible members of the armed services, hardworking men and women who have, served this nation with such honor. Make sure that they get, if they've got claims, we can help them with that. We help we help the civilians with Social Security, IRS, on and on and on. And we have put $1.8 million back into the pocketbooks of our constituents through the case management work. And that's a really special part of the job that gets no attention, but it's really great. But partly too is I observe what all of you are doing in Highland as much as I can. And I actually have virtually to present for you all here today. And by the way, this is, hats off to Rick Hamill. And, we're happy about how the little thing that happened at the beginning of this month turned out for him. And, it's a testament to his leadership, but more so in an official capacity. I wanted to present to all of you. I have had a flag flown over the United States Capitol in your honor, in honor of Highland Township and all of the great township board and the township supervisor. So I'm presenting this to you virtually tonight, but we'll get this mailed over to you. And again, this is one of these special congressional flags that we got sent in from Washington, D.C. for all of you. So we know this is something that we can all come around, this beautiful country that we love so much, and obviously all of our wonderful patriotism. I still can't believe it. Summer's coming to an end. So what are we going to do? Are we going to get a big bill passed? Well, I am pushing on it. And like I said, I'm working with anybody to get some good stuff done for Michigan. We just want to make sure, we're not continuing to tax our residents more. And I worry about schools running short on funding, and then they turn up to you guys at the municipal level and they say, well, can we do another millage, or can we do a millage? And that's really going to be pushing our constituents to the brink. And I don't want to see that. obviously. I've also got another really exciting bill out on the Resilient Supply Chain Task Force Act. This is the big secret. This is how you do bills, bipartisan, bicameral. This is going to strengthen our supply chain, led by the Department of Commerce, working in coordination with our industry leaders, workforce training, and using open source platforms to test the systems and test the systems, particularly before crisis hits. If it's, we've been, we kind of saw some supply chain disruptions with this global pandemic. Love your mask, Rick. I got mine. It's a Ford one. I got my Ford mask, but we stepped up here to meet this industrial call to action. So it's really, really exciting. Every day here we're all working together and guiding this country through these new changes and transformations, and eager and grateful to work alongside all of you. So you all reach out to us anytime. I see we got our fire chief on. Thank you, sir, by the way. God bless. And, thanks to all our troops and our wonderful students and, all the people who make our community so great.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate the gesture with the flag, and we appreciate what you're doing for us tremendously. I mean, you are our Congress.
Join the meeting.
And that's critical. I think that it doesn't matter what party you're in, it's that you're working for the people, and I think that's a very important, critical thing. We do have a gentleman who is our #1 Democrat in the township, Mr. Peter Worthman, who is
I thought he looked familiar.
So
Hi, Peter. Yeah.
So he's muted, so he doesn't want to have to speak today, I guess.
Well, I'm going to miss, our longest table event and some of our good traditions. And, I love driving through Highland. All the small businesses that we have. And folks, we want to make sure those small businesses can survive too. So you make sure that they have a line to me. I'm trying to put together some thoughts about, maybe tax deferrals or repayments. We had some businesses that were closed for 6 months and still paying big tax bills, right? Well, they couldn't even conduct commercial activity for various reasons. But, look, pandemics end. We're going to make our way through this. In the meantime, we're staying safe. We're leading through great inspiration here. Our manufacturing economy is second to none. I wish you could all see my colleagues in Washington are, just in awe of what this region has been able to do for the country. And we stepped up to that industrial call to action. And that's what I want to champion in the nation's capital for all of us, and make sure we can continue to innovate and do so through equality and love of this great country. So thank you so much for having me, and we're going to get this flag over to you all in Highland.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's a virtual handoff.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Public comment. Public comment. All right, no public comment. Pending business. Chief, you want to sign in on this one?
We posted the out of service 1998 Seagraves fire truck for sale. We posted on Craigslist, eBay, on the Township website, many different digital formats. We didn't receive any bids for the vehicle. With that being said, there is a company in Westland and Saginaw that purchase drivetrains, engines, and transmissions for large commercial vehicles like this. This is a very desirable unit only because it doesn't have the emissions control stuff on there. So I'd like the board's permission to approach them and offer it for sale for scrap and reuse.
Hopefully there's a pretty good chance that we'll get at least the minimum that we're asking for. And I think that's a pretty good possibility. So
Fingers crossed.
Cross our fingers, but the drivetrain alone is probably worth that. So, all right, so we'll put that to the board. I'm going to make a motion that we move to scrap the 1998 engine 2. That's a motion.
Put a minimum on it or no?
No.
Your motion is to sell it for scrap?
What's that?
Your motion is to sell it for scrap?
Yep.
And what was that minimum amount you thought?
Well, you don't take it to a scrap yard and ask for a minimum.
Oh, you said you thought you had some value.
Well, we're hoping it's worth at least the 5,000 we were asking that nobody wanted to bid on.
We had no bids on it?
Nope, zero.
It doesn't matter for this one, but the time on this ad says 7:30 instead of 6:30. Not that it matters.
We closed down on 3 o'clock last Friday.
Okay, well, anyways, there's a motion
Restate the motion, please.
to scrap the 1998 Seagraves fire.
I'll support.
Okay, moved and supported. Vote, please.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
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 Motion carries.
All right. You're good, Chief. Thank you. All right. The next item is new business broadband master plan proposal. The documentation that I put in the package, we're not going to vote on this tonight. Instead, I do want you to review that though, because it's important as a component of if we move forward. But we do have a special guest, Michael Watsa, who is an attorney, and his specialty is, I guess, fiber optics. Is that correct, Mike?
Well, telecommunications, energy, and pipelines on behalf of municipalities.
Let me get you back.
So, Mr. Hamill, can I address the board?
Yes, you may.
This is Gary, and I have no idea why I don't have computer audio and no camera, but I really am watching you. To the board, when I saw this item on the agenda, I talked to Rick, the proposal, and that this was a rather significant issue. I don't have any background on this particular issue, and I've checked, and my firm has not worked on this type of issue either. I was aware that Mr. Watsa had. I called him and advised him of this being presented, and he offered to share some initial insights with the board that may be helpful in considering what Mr. Hamill's proposed. So just with that basic background, his area of expertise is in all things telecom, cell tower, right-of-way, and just about anything else that I typically work on. But I have not worked on any broadband concepts in Michigan or anywhere else. So with that, I'll allow Mike to make a presentation. He provided a PowerPoint, and I think Mr. Hamill has been able to incorporate that in your meeting materials for the evening. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay,
Thanks,
so,
Gary.
Mike, before you get going there, I'll do a little explanation to the board how this came up. A year ago, I was in contact with a company called Entry Point, which is the documentation you have for a proposal. And Entry Point is, it was a year ago in August when I talked to them, and part of the thing that I was interested in is how many complaints we get about our own broadband and how we can't get service to the entire township, and how our current broadband supplier is not really particularly interested in servicing the entire community unless those that don't have it want to pay exorbitant fees to get it to their homes. I mean, we're talking, $2,500 minimums to up to $18,000 to have broadband brought to a house. Never would get your money back on that. So anyways, with this pandemic, what became very clear was bandwidth. And one of the issues we have in our community is the bandwidth falls all apart right about this time, especially at night, which makes it so that everybody has difficulty. Sometimes with staying connected or being able to upload, download. So this brought the conversation back up with the folks at Entry Point, and I think that this is I really appreciate, Gary, that you got us in touch with Mike, because I think this PowerPoint is what we need to move forward right now. So on that note, Mike, I'm going to let you have it. You just tell me when you want to switch the slide. You can see it, can't you?
Well, I wonder if we can try share screen. Let me.
You can do that.
Let
I've
me see
got
if
mine up, but if I can stop my share.
Oh, if you want to put yours up, that's fine. That's even better.
Hang on a second here. I'm going to have to get back in there somehow. Let me, okay, so I've got you shared. I'm hoping anybody that's connected can see that. You can see it? All right, so Mike, you can see it?
I do not see. Well, I see the PowerPoint that I have up.
That's it.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. If I change this,
I downloaded it, so you won't be able to change the screen. So if you just tell me when you want to switch, I'll switch it.
okay. All right. Well, all right. We'll see how this goes. So, well, thank you. So just to be clear, like Gary said, I do basically the same work Gary does, although I do it on a more regional and national level, and that is telecommunications, particularly that we're talking about tonight, and in particular, municipal broadband. I got into all this business after about 15 years of liability defense work for municipalities and others, when a group called ProTech, comprised of about 100 communities around the state, Dearborn, Livonia, Southfield were the creators, and they're the board members, so they're a government. It's a governmental entity. MML is our fiscal agent. So my job is very simply to help you. We have no what's the term? No dog in the fight, other than to see that you folks get the best product you can get, particularly in this municipal broadband area. So I thank you for having me. Congratulations. You are on the front end of probably one of, there's so many hot topics today, but this is certainly one of the hottest topics. And the reason it's hot today, it's been certainly warm in many places for a long time, but COVID, as we all know, we're all trying to work from home. The kids are now working from home. And as Rick said, long about now, we're mid-afternoon, everyone's bandwidth starts to go kerflooey, and all of a sudden your connections aren't working well. This Zoom, for instance, we only have a few folks on it, but I've been in Zoom meetings where there's 100 or plus, and it's a real challenge. And it shouldn't be, and that's the point. The PowerPoint I offer, I wasn't going to send you a PowerPoint at the last minute, but I found that I just couldn't figure out what to talk about without it as a guide. It's really a reference for you folks to keep. You should be able to go to the links that are active, and they should all be good. And if they're not, you can yell at me and I'll fix it for you. But it provides a lot of information, which I think is important for you to have as you embark on the possibility of building your own, probably fiber-based broadband system. This is a very popular thing. Not a lot of cities are doing it, but I've helped a half dozen here in Michigan do it. A little Seaboing up in the thumb was the first. In 2013, we got an award from the governor for it. And they went from Seaboing, by the way, is at the sort of the crook of the thumb, just to the east of Saginaw, and 1,000 residents. And they built a system. It cost them about $1,000 per attachment. And I've got their price sheet, actually, their accounting sheet is part of the PowerPoint, so you can see it and see exactly what it cost them. And so it was $1 million project for 1,000 folks, 1,000 connections. And that's the range. It can be double that, but your cost is going to be in that range. Fortunately, you can municipal bond these projects, and tax-free bonds, pretty hard to beat. And if it's set up correctly, which is part of my interest here, to make sure that it's set up correctly with the right kinds of providers, folks who are not conflicted in any way, you can have quite a system that will do several things. One, it will address the product, the bandwidth, that you should have enough. We'll talk about some more of the details, but trust me, you don't have anywhere near enough. I don't have enough, anywhere near enough. And I've taken these companies to federal court on a few occasions. So they try and help me out, I suppose. But so the product is not good here in the U.S. The price is far above what it should be. We pay basically 2 to 3 times at least for about 1/10 or 100th of the service that we should be getting. And that's we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you'll also have control over price. I mean, obviously, it'll be dependent on how many of your residents take up the business. And if you can get other communities in the area to join you, obviously, the more the merrier, and the price goes down. I've got some price sheets from other cities that will show you what they're able to offer. And you'll have control over the build out. You'll build it everywhere. Presumably, that's one of the goals of government, is to take care of all the people, not just the ones who can afford the extra expenses. So that's the idea. And we've got a few hundred communities around the country that have done this, and we'll go through some of those. So, Mr. Supervisor, if you don't mind, maybe change the page.
Okay. Is our bandwidth showing as false?
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Here we are. Yes. Okay. All right. Great. All right. Great. So, yeah. So, why are we where we are? Why are we having this conversation? And I'm going to try and do this quick, but oh my gosh, this is a week-long course or a year-long course. Well, because unfortunately, we've allowed the longtime providers of internet and video and phone, which, basically it's the AT&Ts and Comcast, Verizons, and Charters of the world, to continue to provide us all of the services that they used to just put phone on, frankly. And we've allowed them to keep doing it over those old copper lines. And those copper lines just can't handle the kind of gig service you really need to be able to compete with the rest of the world. Go ahead and change the page. What do we need to do? Well, you need fiber. That's what all our global competitors are doing, from South Korea, where kids gave up their paper textbooks 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and are now entirely on tablets, because every home in South Korea is wired fiber. Government obviously helped do it, like you're talking about doing it here, where you pull together your resources and build your own. Because the private system, I represent private for-profit clients, and they're wonderful, but they're not going to do anything that is non-profitable. And I suspect there are some areas of your township that just simply aren't going to be profitable to build to, or they would have done it. Next slide, sir. Thank you. So why do we want broadband? Because we use it to connect everything: doctors, friends, family, jobs, global competitiveness. Next slide. And it's not just me telling you this. It's the World Bank, for instance, took note that you can add several percentage points of GDP to a country with good broadband, and you can take a few away from countries that don't. Next slide. And so the pandemic has really driven this point home, as you all know. Down at the bottom, you'll note the real horror in all this. If you're in the rural area or tribal lands, and even in some of the more financially distressed areas of urban America, there are estimates that as many as almost 50 million Americans have no internet access, and a huge number have completely inadequate, and all of us have much too slow for far too much money. Next. Internet traffic went up about a third back in early March, and we all know why. The fact is the system is just not built to handle it, not here in the US. Next slide. Like I said, I'm going to try and go through this quickly. Obviously happy to answer questions at any time you care to raise them. Well, so we saw, and I was waiting for this, back in March, April, we started seeing articles showing up in New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal saying, don't worry, everything's fine. Well, they were basically all written by, financed by the internet providers, the ISPs, saying everything's fine, but we know it's not. I mean, you know it just from your own experience. And in fact, it's not. Okay. Next slide. And I already touched on this. It's simple. Remember, Brooks Patterson had the wire Oakland County, and I worked with that issue and with some other counties who want to do the same thing. The fundamental flaw was and remains in some thinking that the private sector is just not going to build it if they can't make any money on it. That just stands to reason. And so it requires some government intervention. I mean, we're the people, and we aggregate our skills and abilities and our resources. And sometimes we just got to build our own, whether it's a police department or trash pickup or internet. Next slide. This slide references, for those of you who have insomnia and are looking for something to put you sound asleep within about 10 minutes, this slide references the one major U.S. Court of Appeals decision on the subject of municipal broadband. And although the Court of Appeals did not support municipal broadband approach that was undertaken by the FCC at one point, it went on at great length to say, we don't disagree with the fact that we need it, and we don't disagree with the fact that the FCC is right in trying to push for it, including municipal broadband. We just don't think the FCC can force it. But anyway, but it's quite a discussion of all of the facts that we already know so well. If you have insomnia, this is great reading. Akamai is turn the page. Oh, there you are. Oh, you're doing good. Akamai, and nobody's ever corrected me on my pronunciation, so I just keep saying it that way. Akamai is sort of the global internet watchdog, well, certainly one of them, the leading one. And again, another great resource if you ever want to take a look. And they talk about some of the efforts by industry, particularly in America, in various states, and Michigan's one of them, where the industry has tried to either stamp out any municipal broadband competition, frankly, or put limitations on it. In Michigan, we're a limitation state, but those limitations can be easily gotten around. Other cities have, and legally. I mean, not skirting the law, but complying with the law. You just have to make sure you do so. The next slide, it's a little bit dated, but I want you to try and look at, if you can see the detail, because it talks, the U.S. and an outfit called Merit over at U of M and MSU actually did have a hand in creating the internet. But for reasons based upon our allowance of the existing industry to continue to dominate and monopolize the industry, we have fallen from 15 to 25 national or globally. And you'll see there on the left corner near the US that the US is paying $3.33 for 4 megabytes per second. 4 megabytes per second, we couldn't do anything with that. It's almost dial-up. If you look over on the other side, Japan, Korea is not far from it. Japan, they're paying 27 cents for 61 megabytes per second. Now this data is old, but the proportions are very similar. So you start to get the sense that, you know, even if you have the infrastructure, you can't afford it in the US. An awful lot of folks can't. So again, another resource. Next page. So to me, here's the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about. If you look at these three cities, and Sebring's a good example, it's right down, well, down the street, not too far. I pay about that price for what's advertised as 100 megabits per second. So that's not bad. Well, what's the problem? Well, you see the term symmetrical? That means up and down. Means it's a tremendous enhancement of the broadband. Plus, when I actually do a check and see what my actual speeds are, they're more around the 50 range on a regular basis. And there's no caps in your system. There's no hidden language. There's no cancellation fees. There's no contracts. None of the gamesmanship that the monopolies have been allowed to do, because frankly, we just haven't told them they can't. None of those things would exist under your system, ideally. And then if you go up the page to some of these other systems in Chattanooga and Lafayette, you'll see even better pricing in a larger community. Again, if you roll in some of your neighboring communities, and I shared this PowerPoint, by the way, with your neighbors over in Milford, who I just represented on a cell tower matter, and they were interested in this subject. But I understand that they shared it with others. If Western Oakland County put together a group, you could start approaching potentially some of this pricing at the top of that sheet. Caveat: these are all municipal electric entities. So they already had the existing poles, they already had the existing infrastructure to provide electric service. So that it's not apples to apples, but, and you need to know that. But bottom line is you can still build it, and there are communities that are doing it even though they are not electric. Next slide, just a blow up really of the Chattanooga, which is probably the poster child for those of us who are fans of municipal broadband. Really amazing stuff. They were a burned out old manufacturing town, which might sound familiar, and they built their own system, and the industry has fought them tooth and nail, and they now have fabulous service for their residents. In fact, they're trying to provide it to the neighboring communities, and they're being fought tooth and nail on that by the industry. But again, no hidden fees, no contracts, no data caps, none of the fine print that we become so familiar with here. Next look. Again, I'm not going to go through all this, but this is a recitation of some of the speed bumps that the industry has put up for you. They're very, you can climb over them. I've helped others do that. That's not an issue. You just need to be aware of them, because if you don't do it, you could be dragged back to point zero to start over it, which would not be fun. Next item. Highland, Michigan is probably potentially the biggest system. They have 100,000 customers. Right now they have about 500 signed up, and they've got a big area, 100 square miles. And that's one of the interesting projects that's going on right now. Next item, Sebring. I invite you to take a look. You're not going to get this everywhere from everybody else. This was one of my clients. Anyway, and so you get there's the nuts and bolts. Next item is a reference page of just a whole list of things you can look at and think about. The funniest one on here, if you need a laugh, if you haven't seen John Oliver's last week tonight, his recitation on the internet, it is both hysterical and factually accurate, which is impressive. It's definitely worth a watch. Next item, and thank you for that. You're hired. So, all right, so what do you do? Well, So when Gary presented me this issue, and I looked at the offer by the entity that made the offer, I don't know that entity. I looked at them on the internet, but you know, and I admire you for even considering the possibility of laying out money to get this thing started, and I don't want to slow that process down. But I have a couple thoughts about how you might want to proceed. One, do you have a committed community interest? Because, you know, I don't off the top of my head know the population in Highland, but you're probably talking about a 10 million plus project. So how do you want to start this? Well, obviously you want to make sure that folks are interested enough that they're actually going to be willing to allow you to commit resources. And then the next step probably is issuing an RFI, which doesn't commit you to anything. Doesn't cost much. Obviously, that's a role for council. But it just sends out a informational packet to the community, the telecom community at large, and say, hey, here we are in Highland and maybe elsewhere as well. And we're thinking about putting together a group and building our own municipal broadband, or partnering probably with a few folks who maybe will provide some aspects of what's needed, and maybe the private industry will provide some other aspects. And that's why the title of my program is Municipal-Led Broadband. In other words, you're the leader. Instead of dragging behind, you know, whoever, while picking on any big company, that you lead, you decide. Here, we want our pricing to be here. We want our service to be here. We want the build out to be here, and we want to maintain control over that for the life of the. So you do a broad RFI. You're going to get a lot of interest and a lot of information, and probably the outfit that made you this proposal will jump right in there. But you're going to have a lot of information. And from my own perspective, I think it's better to start wide and narrow it down over some time than to focus early and then at when you're in the millions of dollar phase, think, ooh, well, maybe we would have done some things differently back there at the beginning. One of the primary problems that I have seen nationally is where somebody comes along and says, I'll do the feasibility study for free or next to free, and then I'll build it. And that's why I'll give you a discount. And I don't know that that's been discussed with this outfit or not, but that has led to a lot of problems. Going cheap on the front end almost guarantees you're going to be in problems at the back end, because the conflict is obvious, right? I mean, who's going to issue a feasibility study that says, no, this is a bad idea, if they're the ones who are going to make, the $10 million on the build out? So you need to put together a team. The team has to include a municipal network engineer, somebody who represents you, not the industry, and who's going to represent your interests throughout the project. Probably do your feasibility study, and they'll have a responsibility to make sure that things come in as represented. A CPA to do the cost study that's required by state law, and it's a good idea anyway, to make sure that your projections are accurate. You don't get into a situation where you've built a system that doesn't self-fund it. Telecom counsel, that might be me, or might be Gary or somebody else, and bond counsel to help you finance this thing. And just at the end of the day, make sure you retain governance, rate, service, and build out control over your partners. What you don't want to do is give away your right-of-way, for instance, to somebody who then builds a system that they then operate and control. All you've done is create another Comcast. And that's been something that's been an issue from time to time. Almost last slide. This is just gratuitous. This is my other favorite subject. How many of you talk about small cells?
Yeah, this is
Yeah, small cells.
5G. This is what's
Anybody think that's small?
Looks like a cactus.
Yeah, that's actually out in Arizona. It's in the right of way. It's a right of way cell tower, which is a better name for these things. But these small cells, quote unquote, are coming our way, and you need to be prepared for it. ProTech and I fought this state bill all through 2018. We did it by ourselves. MML and MTA went neutral. The industry has a very profound impact on our partners, but our job is to push no matter what. We almost beat them, and we also have led the fight at the Court of Appeals, Federal Court of Appeals, on the FCC small cell order. We won a partial victory just 2 weeks ago, where we now get to maintain some of our township zoning authority over these things where we didn't under the federal law. Unfortunately, those of us in Michigan and 20 other states are stuck with a state law that we're going to have to deal with sooner than later, in my opinion, so that we're not stuck with that law, which is at least as bad as the FCC law. And that's it. And I'm sorry I took so much time.
No, thank you very much. I think that you opened the door up for a conversation that we're going to have anyways to proceed any further with it. So what we'll do is I'll probably get a hold of you and have some more conversation. But I'll pass this PowerPoint off to each individual on the board so they can go through it. And I think one of the things that I have I've learned in the process of hitting on every possible website that I could look at, it's very, very interesting to see where we're really at in our growth in our country and where we should be. And looking at this picture of these small cells, the irony with that is they only function with fiber. And if you can beat them in, then they can ride your fiber. So there's some assets, it can be an asset to us, or I should say, an ability to be able to help fund the system down the road. And a lot of people say, well, you've got high-speed internet access, but yeah, you have it, but it's going to be at a high cost, and it's going to be controlled. And that's where we keep getting in that, putting that pigeonhole, where if you become a high user, you get penalized for it. So there's a lot to this, and it's something that I thought we needed to get rolling. Should have got rolling a year ago or more, but I believe that what's going to happen is we're going to have an opportunity in our community to be able to have the people that are working at home that may end up staying at home stay in our community because we have the resources available to them to be able to continue to work. You can't work with a dysfunctional network. And Comcast is up and down constantly. It's slow as a turtle. And like they say, it's all speeds up to. Well, you may see the speed test go up to a number, but it always falls down to something else. So this is something we're going to work on. And I was looking at Farmington Hills, had a committee they put together, and they have a website that does a really good job of putting in a tremendous number of links, and I'll pass that along to everybody too. But this is something that we need to get educated on way sooner than later. But it is critical that you don't jump off the bridge because there are some things that could jump in front of us. So I appreciate your offer to have this conversation and to present us with this. And we will be in touch and stay in touch.
Super. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Gary, for passing the name. Because
Rick, if I may, before Mike leaves, still there, Mike?
I am.
Yeah, so RFI, I had to ask you what it means. Request for information?
Yep.
Okay. And you referenced speeds going both ways, where Comcast tells you what you can download information at a speed of a certain amount, but they have nothing to do with uploads, right?
Well, they don't advertise that. I mean, for instance, with Charter, which by the way, Charter is trying to get out from under their data cap limitation that they agreed to when they acquired, I think it was Time Warner. So they're going to be starting to impose data caps. But my system, supposedly I get 100 megabits per second download, right? But if I want to send out, it's capped at 20. Many programs that I see are more in the range of 40 or 50 down and 5 or 10 up. That's very marginal. God forbid you have an engineer. The city of Marshall, just quickly, city of Marshall built their system because a family that had lived there sometime had worked for Pixar Studios, Disney, and he had to keep going to the library to download and upload his work, like on the weekends. And Pixar said, "Look, we can't do this. Don't you have a connection at home?" And he said, "No, I don't. And that works." And they had to move. And so the city mothers and fathers in Marshall said, "Oh, we're not going to have that happen again." And so they put their money where their mouth is, and they built it.
Well, another interesting thing is whether we want to do it or not, but by having that fiber available opens up avenues for things like data centers. We have plenty of power here, but we have no reliable internet. But you get the fiber in, and you bring in opportunities for pretty much innocuous operations that can supply a lot of jobs and a lot of resources as well. And I think, like I said, having the ability for people to work at home, the future of the office building is probably in the toilet. And the office building is going to be right here in Highland. And it's going to be at each individual's house. And I think the people have already, those that have realized the pleasure of sitting in their own environment and not having to drive, and how much money they're saving by doing that. The companies are going to be looking at the same thing. Why would we pay for square footage in a building when we can just hire an employee who's responsible for their own space? So it's an asset to all of the individuals. I've been getting a lot of comments on this and not a single negative, which I think is pretty exciting because yesterday, as a matter of fact, a young fellow, 24, works for General Motors. He said he's got a server that he operates that's in Illinois and a server here for some operation he handles, and the up and downloads just make a mess out of things. You know, it makes it impossible to get files back and forth, just like you're talking about Pixar. You got huge files and it takes hours. I think in your slideshow, you probably show that some of those speed things, comparisons. If it's not in there, it's something I have looked at, but how long it takes to download a certain size file. And so just what we're doing tonight, the upload, the download, if you get jerkiness, it's usually because the upload is hindered. So, well, thank you very much, Mike, and we appreciate it.
You're welcome, more than welcome. Thank you, and congratulations for taking this issue on. You're still in a small minority of organizations that are doing it. So.
I've been working with some other, those Milford Township is interested. The White Lake Township has shown interest now, so they had joined our borders. So if we can, like you said, the more you can get involved in it, the more cost effective it becomes because of the install and service.
And that's all doable under the state law. So we can work that through.
Yeah, and so I think it's a good thing to do the intergovernmental relationships on things like this are a good idea. So, all right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Bye-bye. Good night. Yeah, thanks, Gary. Bye-bye, guys. Folks.
Yep. All right, does anybody have any questions?
It'd be nice to have some competitors, cost competitors. That'd be nice to get rid of the Comcast cost.
Well, the thing that can be a potential issue that we have to look at is when Comcast, which I'm sure they probably got somebody listening to this now, after comments in the paper and that, they'll be looking at what is it they're going to do to try and poke a hole in it. And they could look at it and say, well, we're going to drop our rates and so on and so forth. So those are things we have to look at. And then you have to also understand that they might be dropping their rates, but they're dropping their rates on a defective system that they have already. And so education is going to be the key thing here. And so when you supply the fiber, you have other ISPs. Comcast is just one ISP. You have other ISPs that can come on your system and offer other things, like you think about TV and movies and all that stuff. Those are other ISPs. So there's a lot of components to it. It's going to take a lot of education on all our parts.
It's always hard to break the system because that's all you know. Comcast is all you know. I know my son, luckily, he's a computer wizard, and we're doing okay, but he found things that they were doing to our system. Filters, pre-filters. that
Slow you down.
Slow you way down. He found all that stuff. So if you ever have problems, check your system. You probably got a pre-filter coming in before it goes off into your house. Our download speeds got better. We had to, just it's all the extra crap, and they told us we had too much speed at one time. Like, what? So they slowed us down. They did. And then, So luckily he knows his stuff, so I let him do the work. But I told him about this, and he said, "Wow, that's pretty cool." Because he knows how it all works. He's in cybersecurity, and he's pretty excited about it.
So yes.
Okay, so the whole thing, I'm not getting it. We would have a company that we would be running, and we would have to have people who send out bills, and we bill people and they pay for it. I mean, I don't get where this.
Well, there's avenues to that. You could develop or work with somebody that might be a manager, especially if you do multi-community. You wouldn't want to have have 3 communities, then all 3 trying to bill for their own internet for their community, when you can build a common system. And so it could be more like the water system, where Water Resource Commission manages it for us, but it's not a profit center. And that's the key, is that we're touching into something that, a lot of people feel that we should leave, everything to the corporate world. But when you go monopoly, without fail, monopolies always start low, and then they come in and they beat you up, and pretty soon they're living fancy free. You look at the what they pay the CEO for Comcast. We're all paying for that.
Right.
Tens of millions of dollars. So those dollars don't get billed against it. You could, with a committee or the group that he's kind of talking about, you form that to be the management team, and then you develop the process for how you're going to go about doing that. It's all things we have to look at and get put into play, but it literally is very, very, very much like a sewer or water. You're supplying something that the public needs. You're supplying something that you would never put 2 sets of water lines in because somebody else could make more money off it. You do it because you want to offer that opportunity at the lowest rate possible to the constituents. And the same thing with sewer. You're not going to have 2 or 3 different sewer companies come in. So, I think that what Highland did by working with Comcast was kind of at the same position that we're at right now with this fiber. It's like back then, there's no way that the township would wire the entire community. There wasn't even any legal ability to be able to do that. So now, because of what we've watched with other countries, far superior. If anybody's been to Europe, their systems are so far ahead of us that it's unbelievable. And it's because they actually work on a government level to make sure that, you know, there are private entities, but they work more tightly with the government for pricing and that. So this is an opportunity to say, we want to service, and all the complaints that we've gotten from the outlying homes that can't get service. Do you have cable, Dennis? There's one of them right there, no cable. And we can get it to you for how much? Tens of thousands of dollars to get to your house, you know, and that's the kind of thing that if we're gonna do that to our population, either we need to stand up and pay Comcast to put it to everybody, which would be a huge amount of money. And then what happens is they take it over and then they charge everybody to the moon. And they cap your speeds and they make it difficult. So the kids in their learning process, it's that, as you've all seen, and we've had it happen here, people fall off, you know, they lose their connection, you know, their stutters, all that stuff is all because of the lack of bandwidth. And especially with everybody at home, right now, everybody's streaming video, and so the internet is just like plugged.
When we got sent home, you know, from school back in March, we were trying to work in the early evening a lot, and you just couldn't go anywhere. And I complained to my son would educate me and say, "You don't understand. This is that peak time. That's why you're not, you know." It was just very frustrating.
Right.
It should be.
You know, another point though is people are skeptical, okay? And they say whenever government takes over something, it costs more and bureaucracy and everything. And I can just hear that comments too, like, you know, the Social Security, the mess it is, the government, you know, and then the post office and things like that, you know, when the government takes over. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Sometimes the education piece.
It's not just, it's not necessarily government, it may be just individuals in the government.
Exactly,
put
right,
road
the
in.
leadership.
But I think what you have to look at is, if you left it to, and I asked Russ Tierney this, and I thought he was a good one to ask this question. I said, so you don't want to pay any more taxes, and you think that the road commission is doing a lousy job. What if we just had everybody, all the business owners and everybody that uses the roads pay for the roads? You think they get paid? Absolutely not. Nobody would fund it. So what happens is there's certain elements of the things that we do to generate our wealth and our well-being requires somebody to moderate it in a format that makes it so it's fair to the public, the payers. So what this does is allows for the users to be the owners. So it's a lot like a company that goes into a corporation that converts itself to an employee-owned.
It's like a co-op.
Format. Yep. So like up in Indian River, they have Presqu'île Electric. It covers a huge area. That's all owner funded and operated. So users pay. Here, the users pay to fund a defective system and it keeps going up and up and up and up. You know, but we have no say in it, and that's the other part. If you remember back a couple of, we had the Comcast fellow that came in that was our rep, and he informed us that the law was changing and that we no longer would have any input into, and he said that right at the board meeting, we would no longer have any input into what Comcast did because the FCC changed the rules. So it's because they were bought to take away any input from the local government, because what they're delivering is a utility. You know, you got one electric company in Highland. You don't have two. If you had two, you have a lot more lines, and then you'd have people competing with each other for it. It might even be higher than it is now.
Mary, when did we start with Comcast and all of our relationship? How far does that go back? Before your time when you were on the board, or that?
It was before I was on the board.
Okay.
And we have the cable franchise agreements in the office, you know.
Yeah, right. I just wondered how far back it went with that. I just wonder if you remember how far.
So it was more than 20 years ago.
Okay. I sat on that, the committee we were on for a while, that was, we met over in Wixom. I just remember the one time I first came on board and I was questioning about Dale Fagley. I first got elected, and I said, I asked the guy who the representative was back then from Comcast, and we're not going to do that. And I remember Tom Zoner telling me, well, you probably should just tell that guy to move. That was his answer. I go, you're kidding me, right? I said, I tell a guy to move. He just wants cable down his road. I mean, but Dale lives so far enough out that they just said, too bad. I said, we won't spend the money to do that. I didn't realize it was that way at the time. I was young and just didn't know. And I was shocked. I was shocked by the response. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying. It's just probably everybody's so used to it, I think anyway, with Comcast. I had to go fight not too long ago to get my bill back up. So I went over to Brighton and waited and sat with them. They were really nice to me. I got my price back down. Still way too much, but I was happier. But the idea is probably that's all we're used to. And you're going back to your point, I think it's a big education piece. That's what's got to be. You're right, people are, because they're they're happy, but it's kind of a comfort level in a sense, even though they know they're paying too much. That's what I feel. But you know what? I turn on, of course, I watch Friends reruns every night. That's all it's about on at the evening. There's nothing on to watch, I don't think. But you know, but it's just that's me personally. But the idea, it's the education piece. Show people there are different ways. The problem is when you're in for as many years Comcast has been around in Highland or everywhere. Now, Charter's up in the Ludington area, and that's not any better. It's not any better up there.
Right. So, well, what happens is you're probably familiar with the terminology algorithms. They do the same thing to the users for broadband as they do to people who watch YouTube, or if you're on YouTube, the algorithm will determine what you watch on a regular basis. And the next thing you know, it's feeding you.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. They're watching your level of use, and they're saying broadband abuser, and they wind you down. Even though you may have agreed to pay more for higher broadband, you've had to do it. My wife who's runs a business, and especially during peak tax time, everything's electronic. You have to be able to be connected and at a speed that'll handle it. So we have to, every month, we got to call them and say, hey, you've throttled us back. Oh, yeah, I see we have. Yeah, because they got an automatic pilot on that thing. They watch you, and then you think everything's rolling along at a nice clip, and then you'll suddenly go, wow, my computer's getting slow, or this is going slow, and then you call, somehow you got changed. Well, you're still paying the higher price, but they've got you at a lower level of speed. So it's consistent, and it's egregious, and it's on purpose.
And I learned when I was over there, we do have data caps. We've never hit that. They said they usually give you, my son had the problems in college, 3 guys all around the computer all the time, they're all in the program, which you didn't get billed the first month, but after that they would bill you extra because you went over your data. So if you do a lot of streaming or working on the computer, or which my son does, we've never hit it, but I didn't realize even we had it in our house. You haven't got it yet, so you probably won't, but we do have data limits too.
Well, and there's a reason for it. The gauge of the copper wire, when it was originally installed, was installed for some very basic television use. It wasn't really a lot of internet use 20 years ago. Think about what we had for computers and stuff. Yeah. So it was mostly communications and TV. Then suddenly all the computer stuff comes on. The gauge of the wire can't handle the flow. It's like a hose, is all it is. The bigger the hose, the more flow, the more you get out of it. So they upgraded quite a few of the main lines in Highland to a much larger cable size. But now it's at a level where it can't handle the flow. So they have to throttle people, or people will fall off. It's kind of like Nextel back in the day when 5 o'clock came around and you get bumped if you were on there for more than 5 minutes. Yeah. Nextel won.
So we're looking at exploratory at this time.
What's that?
We're looking at exploratory.
Yeah, and to kind of explain this thing that I came up with here, which I don't have any problem with Mike's points of view, but this is essentially the development of a plan to move forward. In other words, it goes through and it asks all those questions. It gets into your community, it asks the community those questions. So what you're doing is you're actually developing the whole process so that you have it out there for the public to see it. And it's just like when they say, what's the sewer gonna cost me? How do you talk broadband when you can't talk price?
Right.
And so this goes through all of that process. So it's like developing a master plan for the township. You pay some professionals to go in and to do that. And I'm very comfortable with this company. I've looked into it. The irony is that Mike had sent an email, and I talked to Gary, and I went on Mike's website and saw some links, and the first link I came up to was a what do you call it, a webinar series. And the very first webinar is put on by EntryPoint, the guys that I've been talking to. So then Gary had suggested that I check with Merit, who is, as Mike had said, they were instrumental in building the original internet. And they're out of Ann Arbor. They're funded through University of Michigan, I believe, and some other elements like that. So I put in a call to Merit, and I got a call back today because I talked to him last, when Gary brought this up. And I asked them, I said, do you do proposals for broadband master plans? And the answer I got today was that we are working with one of their partners. That's EntryPoint. So they don't do that type of a master plan, but their partners do, and this is one of their partners. So it's kind of a, when you talk to somebody who is really the kingpin of the fiber network in Michigan, they don't control the fiber network, but they are a group that maintains security and use for different entities. Like they were very instrumental in bringing the school systems, a lot of the school systems in Michigan, on board with the fiber network. And so one of the things that they expressed to me was they were very excited that Highland Township was interested in being a part of the fiber, would be interested in being a part of the fiber network, because it builds the base that we're missing. And, so it's like our roads. As our roads get more and more congested, what do we do with them? We add lanes. And that's where we're at. We're at a congested point. We need to add lanes. Now it's pretty clear that there's no money in the model anymore. In other words, if they're charging us, if people are paying $150 to $250 a month for internet, they can't jack that up anymore. So there's no money in their model to be able to convince them to go lay fiber. So in essence, live with it, and that's the way it is. So you're not going to get AT&T or somebody else to come in here and do it, because they'd have to directly compete with Comcast, and they'd have to put in all new wire, all new cable. So you're at that. So if AT&T won't do it, or some other company won't do it, then it's that position where you go, okay, maybe this is where it needs to be for the people, by the people. And that's an element that I think that we need to look at it from that perspective. Do the community the favor of offering them the service that's going to keep them employed and engaged into the future, instead of just fighting with this over and over and over again, and receiving the phone calls that we get about, you got to do something about these guys, they're I can no longer afford it, So yes.
So do you visualize it being set up like an authority for oversight between the different communities, as well as they would be like to police it, to keep the costs within? And I can't help but think of Duck Lake Improvement Board. The Duck Lake Homeowners Association, they set up this aeration project on Duck Lake that is so far out there that, but the talent that came out of that, the way they presented it to their constituents and explained how that system would work, and it is up and running, and it's dropped the muck level in their lake, and it's something that nobody in our area had heard of. And Brian, you're saying that your son is interested in this. I mean, this is something that he works in all the time. I think we could have crazy talent in the community. If you have residents sitting on that as well, it would be an additional.
It needs to be manned by people besides just the board.
Absolutely.
It has to be business owners, individuals, you know, and some board members.
You have a commission, you have a group.
You have an authority board.
Because I know if I have a question, I ask Alex, I don't know what's going on. I mean, so,
Exactly.
you know, so I don't want to be in charge of that stuff. It's like learn about it, but I mean, it's.
Yeah, exactly.
Education.
You know, it's like, you talk about the water system. We do own the water system, but we've chosen not to have a DPW. So we pay Oakland County, which is as a management ability to manage that for us. And so when you look at the sewer, the intent with the sewer is to not build a facility that we have to become a DPW for, like Milford. So what you do is you work together with multiple communities and you send the effluent to a facility that is managed by somebody else, and then that's how you take care of that system. And eventually, you know, that system that's in commerce, in reality, needs to be an authority with more communities as partners in it, because it's kind of they can hold people hostage.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is you need to take the hostage capability out of it. And that's where you've got public people, or people from the public who are members of the board that manages it, and not just a governmental entity that changes every 4 years, or now you got a whole other batch of people and they decide to just not that, we don't want to deal with that, and away it goes. It has to be something that can be set up to manage itself through the future. So this is not something that we can just jump on and start tomorrow, but we do need to get enough information together to say, what is the need in Highland, and how are we going to find that out? So you need to do surveys, you need to do the current market analysis. Those are all questions you have to ask and need to get answers for. Now, this particular broadband master plan does not commit anybody to a build. It is strictly to get something for the public to be able to have, and us to have our hands on, to be able to look at it and go, oh, I see this, well, let's go here and let's gather more information here. And then you can tie all those pieces together as you move along. But until it's like I said, the sewer's the same way. Until you get to a point where you can answer people's questions absolutely truthfully, you can't be out there trying to sell something that you have no knowledge of and no answers to. And that's going to be the biggest thing. I already got people, I want this fiber. And the kid yesterday that works for GM, he's paying almost $200 a month. He goes, he would pay twice that. That's his explanation. If he could have the 100 up and 100 down, and but the truth is that's megabits per second. We're talking the capability of doing gigabits, which is thousands times faster. So that's what the point is. So there's lots of people that get it. Most of them are younger than most of us. Yeah. And, there's, ironically, for some reason, I've been involved in all this computer stuff from day one, and I get it, and I have to interact with it all the time, and I see, I also interact with a lot of younger people and when you're trying to do things on the internet that are just huge bandwidth hogs and you can't function, then you realize how impeded we are. And when we have no say, that means our residents have no say.
Right.
So we want to be able to be in a position where, we've had our say taken away. There's been conversation about how we get, $200,000-$300,000 a year from Comcast. And are we gonna make this a revenue stream? Well,
That's why you go to the authority.
that's why you do an authority, exactly. You wanna do revenue, yeah, you better generate something for maintenance. But the object is you're not gonna be paying a CEO, $25 million a year, and then, 15 million for the VP and 10 million for the board members and blah, 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 and down the line. So that makes a huge difference. So I will keep feeding information to you guys. I'll get you some sites. I'll send this to you, but I'll get you some sites to go look at. It could turn into a snoozer for you because it's really intense. But there's things to look at. Some of them are, and one of the things that can be the most nerve-wracking is what happens if somebody, the competitor, decides to go on a war with you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that will be discussed, moving along with this, is that you have to take that into account. And then we also have to be looking at what's going to happen with the state laws and so on and so forth. So, but until you get there and until you have the data to move forward, it's a moot point. So why you don't have to deal with it.
We're good.
Yep, good information.
So this,
It's interesting.
it turned into, and thank you again, Gary, if you're still there. This
Yep,
turned
still here.
into the best way to deal with this. I agree that we need to have a little more input, and I think that's we can drive this forward. And I'll keep my communication with Entry Point open to give them an opportunity to do presentation as well, probably at our next board meeting, so that we can see who that is. But we'll, on that note, if anybody has any other questions?
I do. Oh, not on this. I have a question for Tammy. Did
Okay.
we, November meeting, did we change it from the 2nd to the 9th, correct? Okay, just wanted to make
When's
sure.
our next meeting?
September 14th.
Okay, so on your table, you had a copy of the budget. So please look through the budget for our next board meeting, September 21st. And also, I supplied a little update on the Chillicothe Mill and the skate park. And I now have a drawing of the skate park and some graphics and stuff. And the group that is going to be responsible for raising the revenue for the skate park built a model of it. So there's some photographs of the model they built. And then I also supplied you with some pictures that show other professionally built facilities. So I think that the difference between the model in terms of how we're financing and how the other groups have done their finance is huge. So these other parks are all multi-million-dollar adventures, and the one we're doing is not going to run that way because of the way it's going to get built. So, all right. On that note, meeting adjourned.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.